The list is alarming and frightening. Mescaline, ecstasy, quaaludes, and heroin, just to name a few, all of which are classified as Schedule I drugs by the Drug Enforcement Administration. The heavy hitters on a list of ingestibles and can, and in some cases very likely, will kill you if abused or sometimes even tried once or twice. But also on the list is cannabis, marijuana, which to some is a gateway drug of insidious proportions. To others, it's an invitation to saunter around the tasty cake aisle and blow a week's salary. Former Attorney General Eric Holder is the latest high-ranking official to seek a change of classification for marijuana in what a growing number of Americans believe is the absolute inevitability weed will become legal across this country faster than you think. Our guest is a former DEA Senior Intelligence Research Specialist and current speaker with the group Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Welcome Sean Dunagan to the Hard Line. Sean, thanks so much for joining us. And let's begin right now by telling people that the DEA has denied a petition to reschedule the drug. This comes down to Health and Human Services. They determined that marijuana has a high potential for abuse and no currently accepted medical use in treatment in the United States. That's not what we're told by a lot of scientists and a lot of very good doctors out there, Sean. Somebody's lying to us.
Well, that's absolutely right. And yes, the citizens petition is one of the ways that the government can reconsider the current scheduling of a drug under the Controlled Substances Act. But you know, the reality is there's no conceivable way that marijuana legitimately falls under the requirements for Schedule I, which are no accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. The fact is there are more than 40 peer-reviewed scientific and medical studies that have shown a medical use for marijuana. And so to say that there's no accepted medical use for the drug is just ridiculous. You know, it's been used as a medicine for 5,000 years. The more science that's done, the more clear it is that there's a medical use for marijuana for conditions ranging from PTSD to cancer.
There are so many arguments that can be made. People make them all the time about why marijuana should remain illegal, why it shouldn't be legalized, why we shouldn't have it in this country. But let's leave a lot of that aside for a moment and let's turn to something else about the legality, and that's prisoning. Prisons, the number of people that are in our institutions that are incarcerated around the country right now. Isn't that the bigger issue here, that the drug sentencing issues, the overreach here, the criminals that are basically sitting in jail for what comes down to small-minded items, small issues, that's frightening in this country. That's the bigger issue.
Well, absolutely. You know, we're the world's largest jailer. We have 5% of the world's population and we have 25% of its prisoners. And the main driver for that is the drug war. More than half of prisoners in state prisons are there for drug charges. We arrest more than 1.5 million people every year on drug charges. 80% of those are for possession offenses, not manufacturing or selling, but just for possession. You know, this is one of the really the worst collateral damage that the drug war has brought, is this tremendous over-incarceration that's had just a tremendously terrible impact on many communities, but particularly disadvantaged communities and communities of color.
Well, here we have, too, in St. Paul, Minnesota, they've got a legislative tug-of-war going on there right now to reduce prison sentences for some major drug offenders, but they're also talking about marijuana. And here in Tampa, Florida, smoking pot in Tampa, a proposed ordinance comes up tomorrow that would decriminalize marijuana, making it nothing more than a civil penalty. Let's put our cards on the table here, Sean. Can we not say that this is going to happen in this country? Sooner or later, whether people like it or not, we hear all the arguments. We're not saying yay or nay on either side, but it is going to happen. Marijuana will be legalized in some forms in America.
Sure. I really do believe that it's inevitable. First, because the majority of people in the country are in favor of it. I believe the last Gallup poll found about 58% support for legalization. Secondly, as more and more states, you know, liberalize their drug policies, of course, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, Alaska right now have legalized recreational use of marijuana. You know, I think more and more people are going to look around and realize that the sky's not falling, it's not having a horrible social impact in those states. And instead of wasting so much money, you know, our national drug control budget is over $30 billion. Instead of wasting so much money on these enforcement efforts and keeping people in jail, that can instead become, you know, a revenue stream for governments, just as we're seeing in Colorado.
Sean, you used to be in the DEA, so let me put it to this with about 30, 45 seconds that we have left there. Is it fair to say that the men and women of the DEA, the ones who are out there every single day trying to keep this country safe, if we had to guess, and from your experience would say, come on, guys, let's stop this. We've got bigger fish to catch and this is getting out of hand?
I think the majority would. The reality is that at the federal level, there are a lot of U.S. attorneys' offices that have a pretty high threshold for what marijuana case they'll even prosecute. I don't think anybody joins the DEA because they want to bust somebody with a joint. We want to go after the truly dangerous and the truly violent and the really major offenders. And having these marijuana laws on the books and devoting so much of our enforcement budget and incarceration budget to those people is really wasteful.
And as many people would say, empty the prisons of the minor offenses and put the really bad guys and the bad gals in the prisons instead of worrying about a lot of this. Boy, this is an argument that we're going to keep up on for a long time to come and see what happens. Sean Dunagan, thanks so much for giving us that insider's perspective. So much. Thank you. Donald Trump has finally revealed the specifics behind his plan to replace the Affordable Health Care Act. But how much of it is reality? How much of it is fantasy? We're going to find out momentarily when we continue right here on The Hard Line.